Hi everyone, it's Nick here. So in my last video, I talked about file storage in Microsoft 365 and how it can be confusing to work out exactly where different types of files should go for the best collaboration opportunities in Microsoft 365. But I don't think that is the only area that sometimes gets a bit confusing. There are just so many apps and so many possibilities, and it isn't always clear how different aspects of Microsoft 365 work with others in order to make you most productive. And one of the biggest areas where there can be question marks is Microsoft Teams. Because in itself, Microsoft Teams offers huge possibilities. You can do almost anything that you can do elsewhere in Microsoft 365 or Microsoft's wider services inside Microsoft Teams. And this is both great, but it can be a point of great confusion as well. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the anatomy of a team. What happens when you create a team? What are the different parts of the team there for? And how can you work to build a team in Teams that works best for you to get your work done? So in that last video, I shared this slide overviewing how a Microsoft Teams team is really just built on a foundation of a SharePoint site and some other services. But in some ways that oversimplifies the reality, because actually Microsoft Teams is based upon a Microsoft 365 group, and it's the group that has the SharePoint site and those other services. And then Teams layers on a new interface, it layers on chatting and calling, and that's really what makes up a team. Now, a team is really much focused around collaboration through calling and chatting, whereas a Microsoft 365 group is based upon collaboration that happens in your email. So whereas when you create a Microsoft 365 group, you can see a mailbox attached to it, a Microsoft Teams team does have a mailbox attached to it, but by default, you're not seeing that email experience, you're moving into this chat and calling experience. And it's entirely possible if you have existing Microsoft 365 groups in your organization to kind of promote them to be in a team so you get that extra functionality. And in most cases where there are places in Microsoft 365 where you can still create a Microsoft 365 group, it gives you the option of adding on that Teams functionality there and then, because in most cases in organizations where you've already rolled out Teams, you're probably going to want that Teams functionality there anyway. So if we just jump over to a user in Teams, what is the experience of creating a team? Well, by default, every user can create a team. And you can turn this off as an administrator or alter that workflow as an administrator if you want to, but this is just set up as default right now. So when I want to create a team, I'm going to come in here, I'm shown the public teams that are available in my organization so I don't duplicate something that's already there, but I can go ahead and I can create a team, and I can either do it from scratch or from an existing group or team, so I can use that as a template, or I can select templates that either are there by default from Microsoft or I've published within my organization. So, for example, I can have one for frontline collaboration, to manage volunteers, and the differences between these templates and your just from scratch team is there will already be a set of channels and apps in your team that's built from a template that wouldn't be there if you just started from scratch. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to make this a public team. So if it's private, only the people who are in the team get to see it. If it's public, everyone can see it and everyone can join it. So that's the difference here. So let's create this private team. I'm just going to call this Demo Team 1. I'm going to create it, and then I get to add members to it. So let's add Alex, and let's add Adele to this team. And here I can select whether they're going to be members or whether they're going to be owners. So let's just leave them as members for the time being. Close this, and I'm immediately in my team. So when you're creating a new team, you could really think of teams as being one of two things. You have either an ongoing team or a time-limited team. And it's perfectly appropriate to create a team for both of these purposes, but the life cycle of your team is going to be different depending on which it is. So an ongoing team will be for like a department in your organisation, or if it's a large department, maybe a group within that department, or maybe cross-organisation collaborators, so people within your one organisation but collaborating across your organisation who work together on an ongoing basis. So examples I've given here, you might have a marketing team, or all of your executive assistants in a particular area might have a group that they're in and have a team for that. Or you might have all the people across different locations in your company who are responsible for payroll because there are common things that they're doing that they want to collaborate on. And then the alternative is a time-limited team. So you might have a formal or ad hoc group of people who are working on a project or some other activity that has a defined start and end point. And it won't necessarily be that you know the date of the end point when you start, but there will be some kind of end game in mind where that team won't be needed anymore. So for example, you might have a product launch that you're doing that you need a team for temporarily, or you might be designing a new building, or you might have a committee that's putting together your holiday party. And when you get to the end point of your team, you really have two options, and this will depend on the life cycle choices that you make within your business as well as the content in your team. You can either delete the team, in which case all the content within it disappears unless you have some kind of retention policy in place that would apply to it. Or you can archive it, in that you won't be able to use that team anymore, but you can still refer to the content that you've got inside it per the normal criteria of needing to be a member of it. So whether you're creating a team for an ongoing use or it's a time-limited team, the structure of the team that you create is going to be reflective of the work that you need to do. And within each team, you have the concept of channels. So when you start with a new team, you just start with one general channel, and every team is always going to have a general channel. And then you can create additional channels from there based on what you need to do. Really, there are two approaches to creating channels. Either you can divide your team up based on the structure or the organization of your group, or you can break it up based on function. So if you're part of a department or a larger group team where everyone connected with the group collaborates by delivering a variety of work products, you're probably going to denote the organizational subdivisions with your channels. So for example, you might have a hospitality team that has a sales, production and service channel within that team, or you might have an HR team where you have one channel that is recruiting and one channel that is benefits and another channel that is training. Or you might have a functional subdivision. So for example, if you've got a project, say you've got your product launch project that we talked about, you might have channels that are devoted to the different aspects of that product launch. You might have a website channel, a social channel, a launch event channel. Now there is no hard and fast rule to how you do this, but you do need to come up with some way that is understood either within your team or within your organization about how you're going to break up work within the different channels. And if it doesn't make sense to have lots of channels, you don't need lots of different channels. You can just operate with a general channel and go from there. So when you create a channel, the first thing you see is you have your posts tab, which is where you can have conversations. You have a files tab, which takes you into your SharePoint files that you have. And then you have this plus, which enables you to add additional things. So within the context of each channel, you're going to work to create a set of tabs that's relevant to the work that that channel needs to do. So you might have something like a OneNote notebook. You might have notes that the team needs to see. So you're going to come in here and you're going to say, I want a OneNote notebook. We already have our default team notebook that we've created here for demo team 1. So I'm going to go right ahead and I'm going to add in that notebook because remember, a OneNote notebook is something that is created by default when you create a Microsoft 365 group, and you can start using this. So I can create a section and I can start typing here. And that is available for everyone to see. I can come in here and I can rename it, so I can change this to notes. There might be some information that I want to share from a SharePoint site. There might be a planner that I want to share, so I can come in here and I can add in a planner and I can create a new plan. I'll create a new plan called tasks, and that'll be in here. So perhaps there are tasks here and there are instructions for each of your tasks in your notebook. Perhaps there's a website that you need to use each day that you're going to link to. Perhaps there's a Power BI dashboard that you're going to link to. But everything that you put in these tabs is going to be in the context of this team and of this channel. So let's take a look at creating a couple of other channels. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to click on the ellipsis, and I'm going to say add channel. So let's call this my product marketing channel, and I can put a description if I want to. And I have access to 3 different options when it comes to the type of channel. I can have a standard channel, a private channel, or a shared channel. Now the default is a standard channel, and that operates much the same as the general channel in that everyone in the team has access to it, and it is there by default for everyone that is joined up to the team. But we also should think about what are private and shared channels. Well, a private channel is a channel that's for existing team members that allows you to share sensitive content. So, for example, if you did have a team for your HR team, you might have payroll as a private channel because there might be certain things that people who are involved in payroll need to do that you don't want everyone to see. Whereas a shared channel is a channel that is designed to enable you to share that specific channel with people who are outside of your team, whether they be people inside your organization or people in external organizations. So for example, with your product launch team, you might have a launch event channel, and that might be a shared channel because you're sharing that channel with the outsourced event planning contractor. Now, interestingly, a shared channel is very similar to a private channel in that by default, even the members of the team that it's part of won't have access to that shared channel unless you add them to it. So to the people who are inside your team, a shared channel can be very much like a private channel from the experience that they get of it. So let's just create this product marketing channel over here. We're going to create this as a standard channel. And then let's create a, I'm going to add an extra channel here. I'm going to make this a private channel and I'm going to call this supervisors. And let's say I want Adele to be part of this. Now, you will only get access to add people to your private channel who are already members of your team. So just be aware of that. You can't add anyone, whereas with a shared channel, they don't need to be members of your team to be added into that. So you can see immediately you have this little icon here, which shows that this is a private channel. So let's add in here this product launch channel as well. So we're going to add channel as a shared channel, and we're going to make this product launch. Now note here, this selector box, share this channel with everyone on the team. If you don't do this, then the people who are members of the team will not have access to it. So in most cases, you're going to want to do that. And now I'm going to add some users to my product launch channel. So if we think Prabdeep was not a member of this team to start off with, but I'm going to share this channel with him. So I'm able to add him in. I'm either able to add him as a member or an owner, just as I normally would. but he now only has access to this product launch channel. He does not have access to the rest of the team. And if you have your organization set up for Azure Active Directory B2B, then you're able to share your shared channels with external users as well. So given that you can add guests into your team, so long as that's turned on within your tenant, why would you want to use shared channels? So shared channels are not just about giving access to people outside your org. It's also about giving access to people inside your org that need to see content in one channel but don't need to see the entire team. So in many cases, you might have a shared channel and there might be no external users to your organization at all. Guests, by contrast, have access to your entire team in the same way that members of your team would, and they would only have access to other resources if you gave it to them. And shared channels cannot be shared with guests, so that is one limitation there. So guests are external users that have guest access to your tenant, whereas shared channel external users have access to your resources through federation with their tenant using Azure Active Directory B2B. So there's extra work for your IT team to get you set up so that shared channels can be used with users external to your tenant. So if we jump back into our team, there are some distinct differences between our shared channels, our private channels, and the standard channels in our teams. So to demonstrate some of this, let's just jump into product marketing, and I want to add into here a SharePoint tab, and I'm going to, looking at my demo team 1, I'm going to add my documents library in there. Now you can see that inside my SharePoint document library, and I have a team site underneath this team, I have folders for both my general channel and my product marketing channel. And by default, for every channel you add into your team, you're going to get a folder that is connected with it. So let's just jump into posts over here. I'm going to start a new conversation and I'm going to add a file from my OneDrive. This is the only file I have in my OneDrive, so I'm going to share that, and I'm going to upload a copy. And I'm going to send that file. Now I'm going to jump into my files, and I see that inside my product marketing folder, I have my report that I just uploaded. And if I jump into my documents view in SharePoint, I can look at product marketing, and my file is there. And I can even come back over to my files. So if I open my library in SharePoint, you can see I've got my file here in my product marketing folder. And if I just jump up to my shared documents document library, you can see my 2 folders here. So let's just jump back into Teams, and I'm going to jump into my general channel, and I'm going to add my SharePoint from here. And I'm going to add exactly the same to my general channel, and you can see again I've got all of this here. So what's going on with product launch and supervisors? Well, I do have files in both of these channels, but because of the way that private channels and shared channels are set up, they do not share a common SharePoint site underneath them. You actually create a new SharePoint site every time you create a shared channel or a private channel. So if I jump into SharePoint from here, you can see that I've got a site address of demo team 1-supervisors. And I cannot get into this content directly from my other channels. I mean, I could post it here, but I would only get into it if I had access to it. So this is just something to be conscious of, that really everything that you create in Teams in terms of files ends up in SharePoint. But if you're using private channels or shared channels, then you end up in a different SharePoint than if you were using a standard channel. And this is very important, as I think, going back to my last video, something that confuses most people is to do with where the files end up. So when we think about the components of a channel, the things that you're going to build out in order to make the channel the hub for the type of work that that channel is connected with, you have your file sharing that we've talked about. You have task management from Microsoft Planner. You can have notes from OneNote. You can add in forms. You can add in apps from Power Apps. You can add in lists from Microsoft Lists. And you can really surface any content that you like through SharePoint pages to your intranet or to other services. Say there's a payroll processing website that you have to go to in order for a particular job to be done. You can put a link to that directly in Teams. And the objective here is to build out a channel which is reflective of the work that someone is doing so that they can do the majority of their work without having to leave Teams. So let's just jump back over to Teams and take a look at this very quickly. So in terms of Planner, I'm going to click on the plus in my tabs and I can add in here a plan. I can use an existing one, or I can create a new one. A better example of this, I've already got my tasks up here. So if I jump down to my product marketing, I can actually come in here and I can add a plan, and I'm going to add an existing plan. I'm going to add tasks in here. So I can actually sync my plan across different channels. So I can have 5 different channels for 5 different types of work, but I can have the same plan that is connected to them, and I can have a bucket for each of those different work strands in here. So everyone is on top of every piece of work that's going on in the team. So I can add in a Microsoft list. I can come up here and I can go to lists, and I can either add a list from a SharePoint site, or I can create a new one. So let's create a list. And I can create from my templates just as I normally would in lists, but it's going to live here directly in my team. I can add in a Power BI dashboard or other reporting from Power BI. I can add in videos from Stream. So you really should get familiar with these basic apps that you can have, but also if there are other pieces of software, other services that you use within your organization, then there's a good possibility that there's already apps to connect you into that ecosystem. So there's lots of interesting things that you can do with services that are outside of the Microsoft ecosystem, but do all of those things from Teams. So really you should spend a bit of time when you create a new team thinking about how people are going to use it and designing your channels to really focus in on their productivity. So I've talked a lot about channels, but there are certain components that apply to the team itself. So one important one is shifts, and I've talked about shifts before. I'll link to the video that I made about shifts here. But shifts is a service that enables you to schedule your team from within Teams. And you get 1 shifts per team, not per channel. So you need to make sure you've got the right people who are members of your team. Dataverse for Teams. You can create any number of apps and you can show different apps in different channels, but your Dataverse for Teams environment is locked into your particular team. You've already seen in the examples that I've given that Forms and Planner have a group ownership structure. So they are not owned by a channel, they are owned by the team. And there are certain things like Planner that you cannot add in to a private team because they cannot own those. Your underlying SharePoint site collection, except for your private and shared channels, is owned on a team basis. So anything that you can access from one channel that's a file in your SharePoint site, you can access from all the other channels if you set up your tabs correctly. And also the underlying Microsoft 365 group and associated security group. So really anything that comes through that Microsoft 365 group structure is shared across your team. So hopefully this video has surfaced some information about how Teams works and the different options that you have when you're setting up a team or you're setting up your channels that will help you to maximize what you can get out of using Teams for you and your users. Remember that we don't just need to think about those people who are very familiar with Teams or very familiar with the options that exist in Microsoft 365. Our systems also need to be set up for those people who are new to Teams, or those people who don't have that familiarity or frankly even that much interest in how systems like Microsoft 365 work. The beauty of Teams is that you can set up a team to really focus in on what does this team need to do, what do these groups of users need to do on different tasks, and surface the right information and the right tools in the right place to maximize their productivity. But it does take some thinking about to get it right. You do need some planning and really having a full understanding of what are the different options and why are they there and how do they relate to one another is essential to be able to get it right. I think this is a topic that there isn't enough content out there on because every organization is different and every team's workflows are different. And there's a really great possibility within Teams to customize for your use case. But a lot of the time we don't talk about what are those different types of customizations, what's the flow that you need to go through. So hopefully this is something that I can come back to in the future and make some more content on to help the viewers of this channel to organize teams for maximizing productivity for your team. So it's the holidays, so I will say happy holidays to everyone. And until next time, bye-bye.